So today I'm supposed to talk about how the class of explicit instruction will make me a better, more effective teacher in the long run. Um, it was really hard to implement a lot of this material because we are on summer break and I didn't have students where I could actually implement things to. So it'll be interesting to try and apply most of this in the fall. The 16 elements of explicit instruction I'll discuss and how I use them already because most of them I already use and how I plan on improving them. So the first one is to focus instruction on critical content. That's pretty easy for me because that's what I do as a special education teacher. I focus on the critical skills that the kids need in order to get through the classes. I usually work with kids one-on-one based on their IEP goals. Sometimes I have a group of 2, rarely do I have a group of 3, but most of the kids are working on their individual IEP goals. So it's pretty easy to focus on their critical content areas. Number 2 is sequence skills logically. For me, that's pretty easy. I usually come up with an overall goal that I want the kid to accomplish through one whole IEP year. So if a kid's IEP is due in December, then we write the goals that they would be able to complete within 1 year's time. So in December of the next year. We don't go by the school year. It's all based on how much the kid can grow in one IEP year. So sequencing those skills logically is pretty easy. I come up with a general goal that they need to accomplish, and then I go in each week and or month. It depends on how hard the skill is for the kid, and go in and sequence what we're going to do to reach that goal. And I just make a goal sheet, and each week we assess and monitor how they're making progress towards that goal. And then every quarter we have to report on that goal. Next is we break down complex skills and strategies into smaller instructional units. So this is basically what I do day in, day out, is taking these large concepts and breaking them down into smaller units. A lot of times I show kids how to use graphic organizers. Teaching older elementary kids this last 2 years, I have become very good at it because I want them to be more independent. Coming from a secondary position before taking this one the last 2 years, I know what's coming, and I know that they are expected to work independently, and so we really work on getting kids to learn how to use the materials that are given to them to work independently. Because this upcoming fall I'm taking the position at the junior high level, and so I expect my kids to be able to use those skills on their own and work for the most part independently in their study skills class or learning lab, whatever you want to call it. But kids will come to me and be expected to work independently on their work. Most of it is grade level. Number 4 is to design, organize, and focus lessons. My lessons are based on individual needs, not usually on a whole group. The first 2 years of teaching, I taught at a secondary school that I was allowed to teach more than 1 to 3 students at a time, and I had to make sure that I was prepared and organized for each day because I would have 7 of 8 classes, and I would be teaching actual groups of students rather than individually. Now, the last 2 years it's been more individual based, and this upcoming year will probably be small group, individual based, with an emphasis in getting kids to work independently on their grade level work. Number 5 is to begin lessons with clear statement of the lesson's goal and your expectations. I am all about the expectations. I teach my kids the expectations at the beginning of the year. We practice them in the beginning, and then I expect them to follow that. If they are not following that, I have no problem with correcting them and giving them that affirmation or corrective feedback when they are or are not doing something that they are supposed to. But I am very consistent with my expectations, and I expect kids to follow my expectations from August through May. And I usually don't have a problem with it because I don't let them slip up. Review prior skills and knowledge before beginning instruction. So coming into my first teaching position, I didn't know the kids, and so it was really hard, and I had never taught a large group of students. So I had to use my planning to really focus in on pre-teaching skills for math vocabulary and math skills, because if they couldn't pass those pre-lesson skills, then I would have to go back and teach those pre-skills before they could move on to the next concept. So it's really getting to know your students and where they're at academically. And when you're working with special ed students, even though their grade level standard says they should know this, more than likely they do not. So you're going to have to go back and revisit it. My position at the elementary school the last 2 years, I had to really get to know the students and what they can and can't do. I really had to read up on their IEPs and their goals, because my teaching partner also was new. We were new at the same time. Both the SPED teachers left within the same school year, so we were getting to know the kids, they were getting to know us. The second year was definitely much easier than the first. This coming year, I will be teaching junior high students, and lucky for me and them, I've already had them as 5th, 6th graders at the elementary. So I pretty much know what they're capable of, how far to push them, what they need to know, and what their prior skills should be for math, reading, writing, and all of those. Number 7 says provide step-by-step demonstrations. I already do this. To me, school was hard growing up. I was not really actively engaged and didn't really care about school. And as I have worked with students as a sub and a para and now a teacher, I really try to break down concepts for kids, and I really try to make sure they understand a concept before moving on. And the old fairy tale of kids will always get it if you keep moving doesn't work for my kids. So I have to provide step-by-step demonstrations. That's what I use graphic organizers for. For example, I will make a graphic organizer for kids to multiply multi-digit by multi-digit numbers and color code the boxes and have it laminated on the paper, and then they can use a dry erase marker to write on the laminated paper itself. Use clear and concise language. That's something that just naturally comes to me, because me as a learner, if someone used a different word but it meant the same thing, I would be really confused. And so if I decide to use a different word in a lesson or concept, I will say this also means, and let them know. And then I try to use the same word throughout until they get used to that, and then I may switch it to another word just because we're expected to use specific words at times. The next one is to provide an adequate range of examples and non-examples. This is something that is a little difficult for me. I mostly enjoy teaching math. I started out as a math major, and then I switched it to special ed, and providing examples and non-examples in math for vocabulary is really hard, but I hope to improve that and to use Dr. Archer's viewers guides and layout of providing those non-examples and examples to my students and make me that more of an effective teacher. Things about in writing and reading, social and science, I think it's much easier to provide examples versus non-examples, just because it's not always black and white in those topics. Math is very black and white, so I think it's harder for me. Number 10 is to provide and support practice, provide guided and supported practice. This is something that I do constantly, and I give them cumulative practice, as Dr. Archer has discussed, with ease. But I really provide a lot of guided and supported practice, because more than likely, if my kids have homework to take home, they don't know how to do it at home. Therefore, they either don't take it home, or they take it home and it doesn't come back. So when I teach kids and I expect them to complete something, we may take an extra day to try and complete it in class, because more than likely, if I send home homework, it's not coming back. So practice is usually almost always guided and distributed in the classroom. Cumulative practice we do usually, and I try to get them to do it independently for as much as possible, and then we go back and we review it, just because my kids do not usually retain a lot of the concepts or skills that they learn. Number 11, require frequent responses. This is something that I feel like I'm really strong in. I do like how Dr. Archer provided with different examples on how to get kids to frequently respond more, and it's not always the same thing over and over and over again. You know, I notice that when I'm teaching, I will ask the kids something, and if they don't answer me, I will like head nod and say, okay, do you understand what I'm saying to you? And they will say yes or no or whatever. And they usually get pretty bored. So I like having a variety of methods to use, which I listed in the final project, and I have made a list at school, and I want to put those practices on a note card and then randomly draw them for lessons when I'm planning them, and then try to actively engage those students using that kind of surprise method, I guess. Number 12 is to monitor your students' performance closely. This is something that I have to do as a special education teacher. I have to constantly be testing and monitoring and making sure that they're making progress. I have to make progress notes and have evidence of this progress goals every quarter. So it's something that I have to do naturally, and I am not one to teach from my seat. I have been taught and also enjoy teaching from my feet, and I like to roam around the room as it is and engage with the students to really know that they're understanding a concept. So that's something that's pretty easy for me. Provide immediate affirmative and corrective feedback. Having teachers in the past who have not provided me with affirmative or corrective feedback for high school, college, my graduate, I think it is so important to provide feedback to my students. I don't give my kids practice without providing them feedback, or ask them something without giving them feedback, because what's the point? They won't do it then. So I believe in providing feedback almost immediately. Delivering the lesson at a brisk pace. This is something that is a little bit more difficult being a special ed teacher, because if you're presenting a lesson to them and they aren't getting it, you're going to have to go back and try to figure out a different way to teach them. So I feel like giving a lesson at a brisk pace has different meanings. I have to do a lot of scaffolding, which was discussed in the class, in order to make sure that the kids are getting the concept, because that's what I'm there for. I'm there to teach kids the foundational skills that they are lacking or disabled in, if you will. Help students organize knowledge is number 15, and this is something that I have to do on a regular basis. This is a skill that is taught by me to all of my students. I am constantly showing them how to organize their work, organize their lockers, organize their backpacks, organize the material in their heads. Typically, we keep a binder for each class, and we organize things in that manner when we're in our learning lab or study skills class. I also help them understand this concept will help them later with this concept, and then when we get to that later concept, then I say, remember when we learned this concept, this is why we learned it, because you have to know this in order to complete this concept, if that makes sense. Number 16 is to provide distributive and cumulative practice, which I've already talked about. Kids, they need in my department need practice all the time. I feel like explicit instructional class has given me affirmation of the things that I already do as a teacher, and the toolkit, I have put posters on my walls in the classroom, hopefully to help remind me of those things. I also plan on doing more planning time that I will, now that I'll have time, for one. Two, I will be at a grade level that is more comfortable for me and content-wise and skill-wise for kids. So I feel like I'm just going to have to wait till this fall to really apply all the things that I learned.